Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Scottish Oatcakes. That's right, these amazing oatmeal pancakes are the perfect breakfast solution for people that just cannot decide whether they want pancakes or oatmeal. But before we get started, I should explain. The Scottish Oatcakes I'm doing here are the softer pancake-like version, as opposed to the more popular Scottish Oatcake recipe, which is sort of a drier and much denser cookie. And while there's nothing wrong with that version, I just don't want it for breakfast. Especially if I'm making these for some kind of fancy brunch like Mother's Day. So now that we've cleared that up, we can go ahead and get started by dumping 1 cup of rolled oats into the saucepan. And by the way, these are the regular rolled oats, not the quick cooking kind. And then what we want to do here is pour in an equal amount of heavy cream. And we will give that a stir and bring all this up to a simmer on medium-high. And by the way, while I really want you to use the regular rolled oats for this, if you have to use the instant kind, I would say just skip this step and just mix the cream in cold and don't cook it. And I'll try to touch on that in the blog post. But assuming we're using regular rolled oats, what we'll do is bring this up to a simmer, and we'll go ahead and give it another stir. And then all we're going to do is let this cook for exactly 1 minute before turning off the heat and letting this cool down to room temp. Okay, so we're not cooking the oatmeal all the way through. We're basically just giving it a little head start before we mix in the rest of the ingredients. Okay, so to recap, we will let that cook for exactly 60 seconds. Then we'll turn off the heat and let that cool down to room temp, or at least very close to it. And once that's cooled down, we'll go ahead and transfer that into a mixing bowl, and we'll add in the rest of our ingredients. And as you can see, as that stuff cools down, it's going to get nice and thick, which is exactly what we want. And then once that's been transferred in, we'll go ahead and add a little bit of lemon, both the freshly grated zest and a little bit of the freshly squeezed juice. And I should mention, these are usually made with buttermilk, which is pretty tangy, so the lemon here is going to help make up for that acidity. And then to help balance that, we will also drizzle in about a teaspoon of honey. And I say about a teaspoon, but I'm just guessing, since I'm not going to measure this. I'm just going to drizzle a touch in. And then we're also going to want to crack in 1 large egg, which if you're making a video, you really hope there's some weird white thing going across the yolk. So that worked out. But anyway, let's go ahead and finish this up with a nice big pinch of salt, as well as a little bit of baking soda, which yes, classically would be added to our dry ingredients. But I just wasn't feeling very classical, so I decided to add it here, and it makes absolutely no difference in this. And what we'll do is give this a very, very thorough mixing with our spatula before adding our dry ingredients. Or I should say dry ingredient. Since once this is mixed, the only thing we're going to add is a little bit of self-rising flour. And if you don't have self-rising flour, all that is flour with a little bit of baking powder and a little bit of salt milled into it. And as usual, I will give you the formula for that on the blog. So we'll go ahead and stir in just about a 1/4 cup of that, mixing until it just disappears, but then no further. And if that didn't seem like a lot of flour, it wasn't. Right, I don't want my oatcakes to have a bready or cakey-like texture. I want the inside to be nice and moist and very oatmeal-like. So we are just doing the bare minimum of flour here to keep these together and to help us form a beautiful crispy, crusty surface when we fry these in butter. So we'll go ahead and stir in our flour. And that's it, our batter is now officially done. And at this point, we have a big decision to make. We can, if we want, and I have, cook these immediately. Or we can cover it in plastic and leave it on the countertop for an hour or two. Or if we want, we can even refrigerate this overnight and make them the next day. So how long you wait to cook these is going to be up to you. I mean, you are, after all, the William Wallace of how long to stall this. But while you do have the freedom to wait as long as you want, here's something you should know. The longer you wait to cook these, the creamier the texture of the inside will be. Right, if you fry these right away, those little pieces of oat are going to retain a lot of that texture, whereas if you leave these overnight, the inside will be very, very soft and creamy. So you may want to experiment, but generally I like to let mine sit for about an hour on the counter before I cook them. Although truth be told, this time I let them go a couple hours, simply because I was waiting for a little better light for the final shots. And this is what my mixture looked like right before I headed to the stove. And all I'm going to do is use a couple big spoons to transfer this into a skillet that's been set over medium heat and contains a generous amount of melted butter. And depending on how cold your kitchen is, or whether you refrigerated the mixture or not, it may be a little stiff. But using the back of your spoons, which you may want to dip into a little bit of that melted butter, you should be able to flatten these out pretty well, especially once the mixture starts to warm up in the pan. Alright, so I went ahead and transferred 3 portions in, and after just a few seconds that mixture kind of warms up, and it's fairly easy to press down into whatever thickness you want, which should probably be somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 inch. I guess that's 3/8. And what we'll want to do is cook these for about 3 to 4 minutes per side, or until they are beautifully browned and we've achieved some significant crustification, which we have certainly achieved here. So we'll go ahead and flip those over and give the other side 3 or 4 minutes. And once these are cooked through, they should probably spring back a little bit to the touch. Or if they feel kind of soft and mushy, maybe let them go for another minute or two. But these were looking and feeling perfect. So we'll pull those off the heat and go ahead and plate those up. And yes, you do get extra credit for serving these next to some seasonal fruit or seasonal bacon. And then, of course, you can top these any way you want, but I'm going to be going with a little bit of butter, as well as what used to be called grade B maple syrup. But for some reason, they changed the name to Robust. Thanks a lot, Canada. And I really wanted to drizzle this on seductively, but instead just ended up dripping awkwardly. But nevertheless, I persisted, and I eventually applied enough syrup to make me happy. Or happier. And that's it. What I'm probably incorrectly calling Scottish oatcakes are done. And forget about how gorgeous these are, or how easy they were to make. The real reason to make these is because they're absolutely delicious, with the most interesting texture contrast between that buttery, crispy, crusty surface and that soft, moist oatmeal-like center. It really is quite texturally addictive. And don't be fooled by those crumbs here and there, which sort of kind of makes this look like it would have a texture closer to a pancake, but that is really not the case. And as I mentioned earlier, the reason we didn't add a lot of flour to this. Okay, if we want pancakes, we'll make pancakes. Here I'm going for something much closer to crispy, crusty, butter-fried oatmeal, which is basically what I accomplished. So I really do love how these come out. But anyway, that's it. My take on Scottish oatcakes, the pancake edition. I was originally going to pitch these as a fancy Mother's Day brunch item, which I still am. But above and beyond that, these are so beautiful, easy, and delicious. Why don't we put these in the regular breakfast rotation and see what happens? But either way, I really do hope you give these delicious oatmeal pancakes a try soon. So head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.